Over the last few stories, I've taken you through the world that Jim Crow built, the world he curated for black people. I told you about a little black girl whose body was violated and then she was denied justice. I told you about a black man sentenced to die over a pocketful of change. I told you about another man who was lynched for standing in a place where he wasn't wanted. Each of those stories was different, but they were all rooted in the same truth, that under Jim Crow, being black was never safe. Not in silence, not in struggle, not in stillness, not in motion. And today, I want to close this series with one more story. A story that holds pieces of all of the others. This black man spoke up. He stood up. He fought back. But his real crime was daring to walk away from Jim Crow. This is the story of Sam Johnson. Sam Johnson was from Honey Grove, Texas. That's in Fannin County in North Texas. We don't know much about him before this incident, but the little we do know tells us that he was hardworking. Sam came from a large family. The Johnsons were fairly successful farmers, and they carried a good reputation in the community, even though they had little to no formal education. One local black leader said that at one time, Sam's father had saved up as much as $1,000. In 1930, Sam was 25 years old. He was married and had a child. He spent his life making a living as a farm laborer, just like his parents before him. Sam was a farm worker for a man named George Forrest Fortenberry. He was 50 years old, and he worked about 200 acres of rented land. Land he didn't farm himself. He hired black laborers to do that for him. Fortenberry was known for being hard on his black workers. He was also known for having a temper, always berating, browbeating, and always threatening black people. Somehow, he'd even gotten permission to carry a weapon from the local law enforcement, like he was the law. It's not clear how long Sam worked for Fortenberry, but by May of 1930, he had made the decision. He was done. He had found another white landowner willing to hire him, 5 miles north of Honey Grove, and he was planning to go. But that posed a problem. You see, Sam was a sharecropper, and that meant debt. That meant dependence. And white planters didn't take kindly to black sharecroppers walking away, because black labor meant white profit. For those of you who are unfamiliar with sharecropping, it was a system that kept black farmers in a cycle of debt and poverty, a new form of slavery. You see, after emancipation, white farmers still needed cheap black labor. One of the many ways they kept black people tied to the land, working practically for free, was through a system called sharecropping. Black farm workers would sign contracts each year with a white landowner. In exchange, they were given a little seed, a small amount of cash, and a shack to live in while they farmed the land. At the end of each year, the black farmer will almost always owe the landowner money. You see, that was the trick. They could never get out of debt. And then they'd be forced to sign a new contract for the next year just to pay off what they owed last year. This is how the South kept black people in new forms of bondage after slavery ended. The system moved from slavery to sharecropping. And when black people resisted, when they fought against the system or did anything that put the white planters' profit in danger, violence was always used to keep black people tied to the land. I've covered some of those stories before, so I won't go too deep into that here. But check out the stories of Pink Franklin and Alonzo Bailey and Jesse James Payne and William Carricker if you haven't seen them already. They show how the law was twisted to keep black people in slavery and what happened when that system was threatened. So Sam leaving Fortenberry, that was a serious matter, and Sam knew it. He made arrangements to cover what he owed. He even secured money from his new boss to give to Fortenberry, to settle the debt and walk away clean. On May 16, 1930, Sam packed up his belongings, loaded them into a wagon, and was getting ready to move to his new job. Around 1 p.m., Tom Hanyard, who was another man who rented land from Fortenberry, saw what Sam was doing. He rushed into town and told Fortenberry that Sam was leaving. When Fortenberry heard this, he was furious. He left immediately to confront Sam. When he got back to the farm, he found Sam standing by the wagon, his things already packed. Fortenberry demanded to know what he was doing. He told Sam he couldn't leave, said Sam owed him money, but Sam was ready. He pulled out a check from his new boss. The money was meant to settle the debt. It was clean and clear cut. It was fair, but it wasn't what Fortenberry wanted. Because remember what I said, this system only worked when black people stayed, when they stayed on the land, when they stayed working, like slaves. A check didn't fix that. It didn't give Fortenberry his labor back. What Fortenberry wanted was control. So when Sam offered the check, he refused it. Then he threatened Sam. We don't know exactly what happened next. Not the words that were said. Not who moved first. But we do know this. The situation turned deadly. After Fortenberry threatened Sam with violence, something caused Sam to pull out his weapon and fire in self-defense. He struck Fortenberry and fatally wounded him. The man who had gone to town to bring Fortenberry, Tom Hanyard, he quickly left with the wounded man and rushed back to town to tell people what happened. Do you remember how this started? It started because a black man wanted better for himself. Because a black man said no. And he didn't just say no, he went about it the honest way. He didn't leave in the middle of the night. He was prepared to pay what he owed, to make the man whole. But Jim Crow didn't care about uprightness. Your honesty meant nothing to him. He had one goal, one obsession, one thing he thought about all day long, and that was black injustice. And he was prepared to ensure that outcome at all costs. That's what Fortenberry was doing when he confronted Sam. That's what Sam encountered. And that's why the moment Sam decided to take agency over his own life, away from Jim Crow, he was also ending it. There was never going to be a scenario where Sam said no and Fortenberry said yes, and the two of them just disagreed and went their separate ways. That was never on the table. Violence was the only way that Jim Crow handled disagreements with black people. Now, before I tell you what happened next, I need to set the scene for you, because what comes after this is pure savagery. But it must be put into context so you fully understand what was happening at the time. May of 1930 was a violent month. 3 lynchings of black people took place in just a few days across North Texas and Central Oklahoma. In just days before Sam and Fortenberry had their deadly encounter in Honey Grove, another black sharecropper and his white boss had a confrontation that ended in bloodshed and a lynching. Just 2 weeks earlier in Sherman, Texas, George Hughes, a black farm laborer, was lynched after being accused of attacking the wife of his white boss. But many believe that story wasn't true. Hughes had gone to his white boss's home to collect money he was owed. The boss wasn't there, only his wife. And when Hughes returned later demanding to be paid, the woman accused him of attacking her. Some said the husband invented these charges to avoid paying Hughes. Now, I don't want to get too deep into this story right now because I plan to come back to it in a later video. But you need to know this much to understand what happened next. Hughes was arrested and convicted. While at court, he had to be locked inside the courthouse vault for protection from the mob. But the mob didn't care. They set the courthouse on fire with Hughes inside, then dragged out his charred body and paraded it through the streets, and burned it again, this time in Sherman's black business district. Even the National Guard couldn't stop the violence. They were chased off by the mob, and by the end of it, Sherman's black community was left in ashes. After this, there were rumors spreading across North Texas. Rumors that black people were planning revenge for what had been done to them in Sherman. So when Forrest Fortenberry lost his life, many believe that's exactly what this was: retaliation. They saw his death not as a result of a confrontation, but as payback. And because of that belief, this time they weren't going to wait for a trial. They had already made up their mind. Sam will be dealt with right now. Almost as soon as word spread that Fortenberry had died at the hands of a black man, white people from all over Honey Grove rushed out to catch Sam. And the word didn't stop there. It spread fast. People began pouring in from neighboring towns. They came on horseback, in wagons and trucks, and many of them were armed. They weren't coming to ask questions. They didn't want the truth. They weren't waiting on the courts to sort it out. They wanted Sam Johnson, and Sam knew it. Just like the white community was aware of what happened in Sherman to George Hughes, so was Sam. He knew what they did, and he knew what it meant. He didn't want to suffer the same fate, so he did the only thing he could. He ran. He hid. He tried to stay out of sight. He made his way to a small wooden shack a couple of miles east of Honey Grove. He thought he was safe there, thought he would wait it out, but he was wrong. Another black farmer revealed his hiding spot, and within hours, Sam was found and surrounded. Sheriff Bud Hughes and his deputies and a posse of several hundred men closed in on the shack. Some say Sam fired first. Others say he didn't. We don't know for sure. What we do know is that the men didn't come in peace. And in the end, who fired first isn't what matters. What matters is the brutality that followed. Sheriff Hughes knew Sam was armed, so he ordered more weapons to be brought in. High-powered rifles, extra firepower. He and his men took up position just outside Sam's firing range and waited. While they waited, the news kept spreading. After Fortenberry died, word of his death and the manhunt for Sam went out over the radio. Newspapers printed extra editions by midday. In all of that press, every word and every headline helped draw a crowd, a big one. A crowd that was angry, a crowd that wanted revenge. By the time it was all said and done, more than 1,000 people were lining the highway near the shack where Sam was hiding. By 4 p.m., the sheriff and the mob decided it was time to end the standoff, and to end Sam. The men moved into position. Without warning, they opened fire on the shack. Round after round. They didn't stop. They just kept firing. After almost an hour of firing, the men went into the shack and found Sam dead. His body was riddled. He had been crouched between a small stove, trying to shield himself. In total, more than 2,000 rounds were fired at the shack. Now, that's a staggering amount of firepower, and the mob got it quickly. Much of it was donated by Honey Grove merchants, just for this moment. This wasn't just a standoff. This was a 25-year-old black man. He wasn't a bank robber. He wasn't accused of attacking a white woman. He wasn't on the run for some horrific crime. He just wanted to move to another city with his family, to work and to live and to breathe free. And there he was alone in a small shack being fired at for hours by an angry mob. What was Sam thinking in that shack? I think it's fair to say that Sam knew he wasn't going to make it out alive. There was no way he believed he would survive that encounter. His last moments were likely fear, as he tried to protect himself for just a few more seconds, and also love, as he likely thought about his family, his wife and his child, and his parents. He had worked hard his entire life, and now his life was ending. Not because he broke the law, not because he committed some great wrong, but because he tried to leave, because he tried to pay what he owed and walk away. But the payment Jim Crow wanted was not a check. That payment was Sam's life. And that check, Jim Crow intended to cash that day. But the crowd was not done. Firing 2,000 times at Sam was not enough. Taking his life in that brutal fashion was not enough. Not for them. Even though he was dead, they still wanted more. Now they wanted to lynch him. To lynch a dead man. When the mob saw officers dragging Sam's body out of the shack, they rushed forward and wrestled it away. They dragged him across the road to a truck and tied him face down. The truck drove to Honey Grove, dragging Sam's body behind it. Cars following close behind, waiting for the next chapter of this horror show. They drove around the town square several times, then down the road for a few miles, then back around the square again. After that, they dragged Sam's body across the railroad tracks and into the black section of town. They wanted every black person to see what happens when you step out of line, when you dare to stand up for yourself. But even that wasn't enough for the mob. Once they reached the black section, they untied Sam's body and hung him upside down from a tree in front of a black church. Then they poured gasoline on him and set him on fire. He was already dead, had been for hours, but they still needed this, still needed to satisfy their anger, their hatred, and their rage towards Sam and towards black people. As Sam's body burned, some members of the mob wanted to go and find his father and bring him to the church, force him to look at what they had done to his son. But the sheriff stopped them. He knew that if they had brought his father, that they would have lynched him too. Sam burned from nightfall until about 3 a.m. in the morning, all the way until heavy rain came and put the fire out. What was left of him was given to a local black undertaker. Sam was quickly carried to the black cemetery and buried. The mob was done, and Sam was dead. Twice. I need to pause here for just a second because I don't want you to think that what was going on was just bloodlust, that this was only about satisfying dark desires. No, this was much more than that. Sam was dead. He died in that shack, and it was over at that point. But not for Jim Crow. You see, for him, there was still one more goal to accomplish, one more message that had to be sent. It was a goal rooted in the very bedrock of lynching, a current that ran through the entire culture of racial violence. And that current was power. Lynching was never just about one person. It was never just about punishment. It was about power. It was spectacle. It was theater. It was terror. Not Black death, but white rule. Not hidden, but in the open. White communities didn't just lynch Black people, they displayed them. They brought their children, they packed picnic lunches, they posed for photographs, and they sent a message. This is what happens when you try to leave, when you ask to be paid, when you talk back, when you step out of line. Lynching didn't require a trial because the guilt wasn't legal. It was social. Your Blackness convicted you. You were guilty the moment you forgot your place. That's why his body was dragged through the streets. That's why Sam Johnson was burned in front of that Black church. Because this wasn't just a lynching. It was performance, a warning. To every Black person watching, don't you dare step out of line. You're free, but you still belong to us. In our fields, in our homes, working for us, doing what we say, when we say, and how we say it. That is why Sam Johnson had to be lynched after he was already dead. It was a message, and it had to be watched. After it was all said and done, everyone went back to their normal routine. The brutality had been carried out. The fear had been instilled. Mission accomplished. The sheriff later said that he was proud of how he handled things, even credited that day with helping him to get reelected. When asked about the violence, he said Sam took the life of a good white man and got what was coming to him, and that no property was destroyed, that things were orderly. As far as he was concerned, it had been a job well done. His deputy said the same thing, claimed Sam earned a dragging and a burning for being stubborn and resisting arrest. And the mayor, he insisted there was no mob at all, that this wasn't a lynching. That's how they justified it. They didn't see horror. They saw control. They didn't see cruelty. They saw order. Remember, Sam's lynching wasn't just violence. It was a message, a warning. It was meant to scare, and that's exactly what it did. After Sam's lynching, there was talk of Black people leaving Honey Grove. They didn't want to be next. The deadly month of May has sent them a message. North Texas is not for us. Jim Crow had worked against himself. His brutality has scared his workforce, but most stayed. Not because they weren't afraid, but because they had nowhere to go. Because injustice was everywhere. Back then, Black people fell into two categories: those with open wounds and those with scars. Jim Crow was on the attack, every day and everywhere. One Black man put it plainly. He said, "Where can we go?" They had seen what happened in Sherman. They had seen what happened in Honey Grove. The South didn't want them, and the North didn't promise much better. And so they stayed, trapped in a system that ruled not just through the law, but through terror, through memory, through fire. They stayed, and the white planters got what they wanted. Their fields continued to be worked. They continued to profit, and Black people continued to suffer. 4 days after Sam was lynched, more than 150 white citizens from the community, including the sheriff and other officers, signed a petition addressed to the Black people of Honey Grove. It said they had no reason to be afraid, that no violence would be done to their race, that Black and white people had always gotten along nicely, and that whites will make every effort to keep it that way. Can you believe that? Such brutality had just been carried out, in public. Thousands showed up to watch. They did it to scare Black people. And now the same people who did it to Sam signed a petition saying, "We're harmless. We get along. No need to fear us." What world were they living in? But you see, that was the mind of Jim Crow. He saw his cruelty as kindness, his denigration of Black people as decency, his persecution as peace. That was his logic, his thinking. Brutality dressed up as benevolence, a noose and a note saying, "Don't be afraid." Can you imagine being Black in that time? Waking up, working like a slave, being disrespected and terrorized all day long, then going to bed and waking up again to do it all over once more. Every day until you died. And you didn't just do it. Every Black person you knew did the same thing. No one escaped. That was Jim Crow's world. That's what he created for us. Sometime later, officials finally got around to making it look like they were investigating what happened to Sam. A grand jury was convened, but as usual, no one was indicted. No one was held accountable. Thousands of people were there that day. The streets were packed. The fire was public. The dragging happened in broad daylight. And still, somehow, no one saw a thing. That's how Jim Crow worked. Not just through violence, but also through silence. Through the lie that there was nothing to punish. Through the idea that what happened to Sam wasn't a crime. It was tradition, a message, a warning. One that no jury in Texas was ever going to challenge in 1930. We don't know exactly what happened to Sam's family after this. The record doesn't tell us. But we know this. His parents lost a son. His wife lost her husband. His child was left fatherless at an early age. They never got to know their dad. Sam never got to teach, never got to grow old, never got to pass down wisdom or watch his child become an adult. Jim Crow stole Sam from his family. The mob members, the sheriff, and the town leaders, they all went on with their lives. They lived long. They celebrated holidays. They raised their children. They laughed. They loved. But Sam didn't, because they took that from him. And they took it from the people who loved him the most. And they didn't even think twice about it. May of 1930 was one of the most violent months the black communities in North Texas and Central Oklahoma had seen in years. In less than 3 weeks, 3 lynchings took place. In Sherman, Honey Grove, and Chickasha. All within 100 miles. All with mobs numbering over 1,000. All triggered by white fear and white control. But if I'm being honest, every month was like that for black people. Every month, every day, in every state, in every city where black people were, there was injustice, segregation, and brutality. There were no happy months or peaceful times in Jim Crow's world. Sam Johnson died a horrific death. His life ended because he wanted to control it. A husband was lost that day, a father and a son, a brother and a friend. But what Jim Crow tried to erase, we restore by telling Sam's story. We can't bring him back, but we can give him dignity. We can say his name. We can tell his truth. And we can remind the world that Sam Johnson was here, that he lived, that he loved, that he was somebody. Not just a tragedy, not just a number in the tally of lynchings for the year 1930. Sam Johnson was an arc that was cut too short. And if nothing else, we can make sure that what happened to him is not forgotten. We will remember him. We will honor him. Because that's our duty. And because memory is a form of justice too. And that is why we're doing this work, telling these stories. Now, I've given you my thoughts. Now I want to hear from you. Had you ever heard of Sam Johnson before today, and how did it make you feel learning about his story? Leave me a comment down below and let me know your thoughts.